This presentation will be on propeller maintenance, balancing, and preventative maintenance. It's important that the pilot is aware of the condition and maintenance of the propeller in order to have a safe flight. The manufacturer will typically recommend a time between overhaul for the propeller, and this is going to be separate from a recommended time between overhaul of the engine or other parts. This is specific to the propeller, and at least either at the annual inspection or the 100-hour inspection, whichever comes first, the propeller should be taken apart and examined. And this includes removing the spinner and checking the hub for any damage or signs of wear, checking the air charge, and lubricating it as needed. In every pre-flight, the pilot should also be checking the propeller and running their finger along it to make sure there are no nicks or damage or wear to the propeller that would inhibit safe flight. If there are any extreme signs of wear or large nicks, this should be brought to the mechanic's attention. Balancing a propeller is a very important part of propeller maintenance, and it's recommended that the propeller be balanced anytime you feel any unusual vibration or anytime the engine is overhauled or there's other significant repairs or maintenance done. And many manufacturers recommend that the propeller be rebalanced every 500 hours. The reason that a propeller can go out of balance most of the time is just age and wear. And if the propeller is out of balance, it's going to cause a lot of vibration. And this is important to be aware of because this vibration can cause numerous problems across many systems in the airplane, including the alternator, fuel control, engine, wiring, avionics equipment, and it can also cause cracks in the cowling or the fuselage. So it's really important for a pilot to be aware of this unusual vibration and make sure that it's checked out. Um, there are two different ways to balance a propeller. There is the static approach and the dynamic approach. So first, with the static approach, to balance the propeller, it is removed from the airplane and put onto a stand in the mechanic shop. And a drawback to this method is that when the propeller is being balanced, it's not taking into account the rest of the parts of the airplane that the propeller is attached to. So the other option is a dynamic balancing, which is done with the propeller still attached to the airplane. And this helps take into consideration all of those connected systems and the aerodynamic forces impacting the propeller in order to balance it properly. Many mechanics will use a small machine, which is a balancer, and it uses a small velocity meter to measure movement and vibration caused by an out of balance propeller at a range of RPMs. And with this information, the mechanic will know how much weight needs to be added to the hub in order to balance the propeller. Because the propeller is so connected to the engine and is so integral to safe flight, it's important to provide preventative maintenance to keep the propeller safe and in working order. So the easiest way to do this, step one, is to keep the propeller clean. With a dirty propeller, a pilot might not notice any new scratches or nicks, and so cleaning it is the first step of action. And so if you have a wooden propeller, you can use a soft brush or cloth with some warm water and mild soap, wash off the propeller, and then dry it with a soft cloth. If you have a metal propeller, you should use possibly a solvent recommended by the manufacturer, just something that is definitely not oil-based, and then dry it with a soft cloth. And with the propeller, it's good to wax the blades, and this will help prevent and combat any corrosion. Some other preventative maintenance that a pilot or owner operator could do on a propeller is lubricate any parts, as long as the owner operator, the pilot, is not disassembling it in any way. So other things that pilot could do is apply paint or wax or other preservatives, as long as the manufacturer says that what you're using is allowed. Beyond that, there are really no repairs that a pilot is able to do since the propeller is such a heavily regulated part of the airplane by the FAA. It is important that any large maintenance is done by the manufacturer or an authorized repair station. So if there are any really big dents or nicks or large cuts, scratches to the propeller that would require heavy maintenance, this needs to be taken to a rated mechanic to be looked at. And because of all of the stress and the vibration that the propeller experiences, even the smallest nick or scratch could cause a lot of harm to the propeller as it continues to experience all of that vibration and stress. Vibration, it's just a part of the consequence of how the plane works, so it's to be expected. But that's why there are also limits on the RPMs that a manufacturer sets for the airplane. So the pilot isn't purposefully flying at a speed that's going to cause an excess vibration that could become very damaging to the engine or other parts of the airplane. This could cause metal fatigue and prop failure. It's very important that the pilot does not operate the engine past the red mark on the tachometer. And it's important also to have the tachometer checked every 100 hours to make sure that it's reading the proper limits and the pilot is being able to be safe and smart with the decision making that they're doing. In addition to vibration, the propeller also just experiences a lot of aerodynamic forces acting on it. And every twist and turn of the airplane, it's feeling a lot of air pressure from different angles. And it's really important to make sure that the propeller is whole and intact and safe to fly so it can withstand all of that pressure. Different materials, we kind of touched on wood and metal. And so each of these has different notes to be aware of. And so with a wooden propeller, a big problem is delamination or the separation of lamination layers on the propeller. So it's like scratches can be especially worrisome on wooden propellers because they can quickly lead to cracks in the propeller. Um, and if a pilot notices a crack or a scratch in pre-flight, the small ones can be repaired with an inlay, and other small damages might be able to be filled or stopped with a resin glue. If there are any cracks in the joints near the metal tipping, that can indicate wood deterioration beneath. And so that's really important to make note of. If there is a crack or a cut across the grain instead of with the grain, that's not going to be able to be repaired, and the propeller must then be replaced. Also, with a wooden propeller, if the blades get warped or if there are any large chunks, chips out of it, then the propeller will also need to be replaced. An alternative to the wooden propeller is the aluminum alloy propeller. They have a few advantages. They are thinner, often stronger, and much lighter. If there are any small nicks or scratches on the leading or trailing edges, a power plant mechanic can often repair those. And even if it's slightly bent, that can be repaired, although that's not necessarily recommended, but it's an option. The biggest issue with these metal propellers is corrosion, and that's something that a pilot needs to be aware of. It might not look like much on the surface, but the damage in the lower layers of the metal can cause prop failure. And so during any 100-hour inspection, the propeller should be checked very carefully for corrosion. It might not look like much up front, but if it's left untreated, it can have devastating effects. The pilot should be especially aware of the issue of corrosion if they are flying somewhere with high moisture or close to saltwater sea. Um, it's important that a pilot never removes the corrosion with any steel wool or an emery cloth or any other aggressive material, as these materials can deteriorate and leave behind little pieces on the propeller which could cause the corrosion to become even worse. And so in the PA44, there are two propellers on it. Both are manufactured by Hartzell. They are constant speed propellers, and in section 8 of the operating handbook, there is an outline for proper propeller service, which reminds the pilot that there is a placard located in the spinner cap, which states that chamber pressure requirements and temperature for counterweight of the propeller. And it's important that the gas charged in the propeller cylinder is kept at the pressure that is specified on this placard. And it gives a ratio to remember that the pressure in the cylinder will increase 1/3 pressure per square inch for every degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature. And it's important to remember that ratio when checking for pressure. It's also recommended that dry nitrogen gas be used so that there is less likelihood of excess moisture that could freeze on the piston on a cold day. The handbook also recommends that the spinner and backing plate be cleaned and inspected for any like cracks frequently. And before each flight, the propeller should be inspected for all of those like little nicks and scratches that we keep talking about, any corrosion. And if found, all of these should be repaired as soon as possible because a small nick or scratch could lead to a much larger problem, such as a broken propeller or loss of propeller tip if it goes unchecked. The handbook also states that you can paint the back of the propeller in a matte black paint in order to reduce glare. And it reminds the pilot to clean and wax the surfaces periodically to combat erosion. Thank you for listening to my presentation.